Ethan Carter and his girlfriend Alice were out for lunch, enjoying the summer day in a bustling local diner. The two had been dating for almost a year, and with Alice's birthday approaching, Ethan had saved up his allowance to get her something special, a bracelet she had been eyeing for months. As they sat waiting for their food, Ethan noticed an elderly couple at a corner table, Tom and Sarah Wilson, quietly eating their meal. They seemed frail and soft-spoken, barely catching the server's attention as the busier patrons were served before them. What struck Ethan even more was a group of rowdy teens seated nearby, mocking the couple for their age and appearance. The group laughed at their slow movements and whispered loud insults that only intensified as the couple tried to ignore them. Ethan's heart raced. He had always hated bullies, and watching this group of kids torment the elderly couple filled him with rage. He looked over at Alice, expecting her to share his anger, but she was busy scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the situation. Ethan couldn't stand it any longer. He stood up, his palms sweaty, and approached the group of teens. His legs felt shaky, but his voice was strong. "Hey, leave them alone," Ethan demanded. "What's wrong with you?" The group fell silent for a moment, surprised that a kid their age was confronting them. One of the teens, clearly the leader, sneered and stood up, towering over Ethan. "What are you going to do about it?" the leader said, smirking. Ethan didn't back down. "Just go. They're not bothering you." The tension was palpable. For a moment, Ethan thought they might retaliate, but something in his eyes made them reconsider. The leader laughed, nudged his friends, and they all left, making snide comments on their way out. Ethan watched them go, a sense of relief washing over him. He turned back to Alice, expecting some form of support, but she looked irritated. "What was that about?" she asked, her arms crossed. Before Ethan could respond, he saw the elderly couple struggling to pay their bill. It was clear they couldn't afford the meal, and Tom, the elderly man, was nervously checking his wallet while Sarah, his wife, looked on embarrassed. Without a second thought, Ethan walked over to the register. "I'll cover their bill," he said, taking out the money he had saved for Alice's gift. The cashier looked at him, surprised, but took the money. Tom and Sarah tried to protest, but Ethan waved them off. "It's no problem," he smiled. As he returned to the table, Alice was fuming. "You spent your money on them? What about my birthday gift?" she asked, her voice rising. Ethan, taken aback, tried to explain. They needed help. I couldn't just ignore them. Alice, however, didn't see it that way. To her, this was a betrayal, a sign that Ethan cared more about strangers than about her. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "You always do this, Ethan. You care about everyone else but me." With that, Alice stormed out of the diner, leaving Ethan alone, bewildered and heartbroken. But as he sat there, reflecting on what had happened, he didn't feel regret. Instead, there was a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that what he had done was right. As he left the diner, he noticed Tom and Sarah waiting outside. "Thank you, young man," Tom said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You didn't have to do that." Ethan smiled, still feeling the sting of Alice's departure, but their gratitude made it all worth it. "It was nothing," he said. "You didn't deserve what happened in there." Little did Ethan know, this simple act of kindness was the start of a life-changing journey. As Ethan walked home after the incident at the diner, his phone buzzed with messages from Alice. The first few were short, asking where he was and why he'd left her at the restaurant. Then, as she replayed the afternoon in her mind, her text became more accusatory. Asterisk. "Why would you waste your money on them? You promised me a birthday gift." Asterisk. Asterisk. "I can't believe you do that. You never think about us." Asterisk. Ethan sighed, his heart heavy. He tried to type out a response that would explain his actions, but no words seemed adequate. Everything he said only made her angrier. He eventually stopped replying, hoping that a face-to-face conversation would clear things up. The next day at school, Ethan approached Alice during lunch. She was sitting with her friends, talking and laughing, but as soon as she saw him, her smile faded. "Can we talk?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Alice stood up and motioned for him to follow her to a quieter spot. Once they were alone, Ethan began to explain. Alice, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just saw those people struggling, and I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Alice crossed her arms, her expression cold. You couldn't stand by and do nothing? So instead, you threw away the money you promised for my birthday gift. It wasn't about the money, Ethan said, frustration creeping into his voice. Those people needed help. I couldn't ignore them. You could have helped them in a different way, Alice snapped. But instead, you used the money you saved for me. You made a choice, Ethan, and that choice wasn't me. Her words cut deep. Ethan had expected her to be upset, but he thought she would eventually understand. After all, wasn't compassion more important than a material gift? I'm sorry, Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. But I'd do it again if I had to. It was the right thing to do. Alice's face twisted with anger. You always think you're right, don't you? You think helping some random people makes you a hero. But what about us? What about me? Ethan shook his head, feeling the gap between them growing wider with each word. I wasn't trying to be a hero, Alice. I was just doing what felt right. Alice's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was cold. If you can't see how much this hurt me, then maybe we shouldn't be together. Ethan's heart dropped. Alice, come on. Don't do this. But Alice had already made up her mind. I can't be with someone who doesn't value me. We're done, Ethan. With those final words, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone, stunned by the abruptness of the breakup. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process what had just happened. His heart ached, not just from the loss of the relationship, but from the realization that Alice didn't understand the values that mattered most to him. Over the next few days, the breakup weighed heavily on Ethan. He replayed the fight in his head over and over again, wondering if he could have handled it differently. His friends tried to console him, but nothing eased the sting of Alice's words. At home, things were no better. His parents, already struggling financially, asked if he had bought Alice's birthday gift yet. When he admitted he had used the money to help a couple in need, they were supportive but worried. His dad sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did a good thing, Ethan, he said. But not everyone's going to understand that. Sometimes, doing the right thing comes with consequences. Ethan nodded, but the truth was he was still unsure. Had he made the right choice? Was it worth losing Alice over? The doubt gnawed at him. However, a week later, a letter arrived in the mail for Ethan. It was handwritten, with no return address. He opened it and recognized the shaky handwriting of Tom Wilson, the elderly man from the diner. The letter was short but heartfelt. Tom thanked Ethan again for his kindness and invited him over to his home. We'd love to get to know you better, Tom wrote. You remind us so much of someone we once knew. Ethan folded the letter and tucked it into his pocket. Despite everything he had lost, perhaps this was the beginning of something new, a friendship that could heal the hurt he carried. And so, with a heavy heart and a spark of hope, Ethan decided to visit Tom and Sarah. Little did he know, that decision would lead to an entirely different path, one that would change his life forever. Despite his busy school schedule and the recent fallout with Alice, Ethan arrived at the Wilsons' home on a crisp autumn afternoon. The house was a charming old-fashioned colonial with a meticulously tended garden and a welcoming front porch. Ethan rang the doorbell and was greeted by Sarah, who appeared to be in her early 70s, but carried herself with the grace and warmth of someone half her age. "Come in, Ethan," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. Tom has been looking forward to this. Tom, in his late 70s, was a tall man with a jovial demeanor and a twinkle in his eye. He had a slight stoop, but still exuded an air of confidence and vitality. He welcomed Ethan with a firm handshake and a hearty smile. The afternoon unfolded with Ethan sitting in the cozy, sunlit living room, sipping on hot tea and savoring freshly baked scones. Tom and Sarah spoke animatedly about their past, weaving tales of their younger years filled with adventure, hard work, and deep love for each other. They talked about their humble beginnings, the trials they faced during their early years, and their eventual rise to financial success. They shared anecdotes about their philanthropic endeavors and their dreams of giving back to the community. Ethan listened intently, captivated by their stories. Tom recounted a particularly touching story about a project he and Sarah had funded to build a community center in a struggling neighborhood. The center had become a lifeline for many families, providing educational resources, after-school programs, and a safe space for children. Seeing the joy on those kids' faces was worth more than any amount of money, Tom said with a wistful smile. Ethan felt a growing sense of admiration for the Wilsons. He realized that their wealth was not just about financial success, but about the impact they had on others' lives. The more he listened, the more he began to understand that Tom and Sarah were not merely wealthy individuals, but passionate philanthropists who had used their resources to make a difference. As the visit drew to a close, Sarah handed Ethan a small, ornate box. "We have something for you," she said softly. Inside the box was a beautifully crafted silver pen with an engraved message. To Ethan, whose heart is as big as his actions. Ethan was touched by the gesture. "Thank you," he said, his voice slightly choked with emotion. "I didn't expect this." Tom leaned forward, his expression serious yet kind. "Ethan, your kindness to us was something rare and precious. We believe in nurturing and supporting people who show genuine compassion and integrity. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to join us in our work." Ethan's eyes widened in surprise. "What kind of opportunity?" Tom explained that they had been looking for someone to help manage their charitable projects and community initiatives. He emphasized that while the position came with responsibility, it also offered a chance to make a meaningful impact. Ethan hesitated. His current life was filled with school, personal challenges, and his strained relationship with Alice. But the prospect of contributing to something greater and continuing Tom and Sarah's legacy was compelling. "I'd be honored to help," Ethan said, feeling a surge of determination. "But I need to think about how this will fit into my life." Tom nodded, understanding Ethan's need for time to consider the offer. "Take your time, Ethan. This isn't just a job. It's a commitment to something larger than yourself. We'll be here to support you in any way we can." As Ethan left the Wilsons' home that day, he felt a profound sense of clarity. Meeting Tom and Sarah had given him a glimpse into a world where compassion and action went hand in hand. He knew that whatever decision he made, it would be guided by the values he had come to respect and cherish. Little did Ethan know, this new chapter in his life was just beginning, and the lessons he would learn from Tom and Sarah would shape his future in ways he had never imagined. Ethan's first few weeks working with the Wilsons were a whirlwind. The charity organization was a well-oiled machine, running numerous programs across the city. Ethan was assigned to various tasks, coordinating fundraising events, overseeing volunteer efforts, and managing community outreach programs. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and he found himself growing more dedicated to the cause with each passing day. One chilly evening, Tom invited Ethan over to his study for a private discussion. The room was lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes and framed photographs of Tom and Sarah with various community leaders and project beneficiaries. A large oak desk dominated the room, and behind it sat Tom, who gestured for Ethan to take a seat in the leather armchair opposite him. Tom poured 2 glasses of brandy, handing one to Ethan. "I thought we could have a quiet chat before you start your weekend," he said, a hint of anticipation in his voice. Ethan sipped the brandy, savoring its warmth as he looked at Tom, who was studying him intently. "How are you finding the work so far?" Tom asked, breaking the silence. Ethan set the glass down. "It's been incredible. I'm learning a lot, and I feel like I'm making a difference." Tom smiled, his eyes twinkling. "That's what we hoped you'd feel. You're doing a fantastic job, Ethan. We've been very impressed with your dedication and how quickly you've adapted." Ethan felt a swell of pride at Tom's words. "Thank you. I'm just trying to contribute in any way I can." Tom leaned forward, his expression serious. Ethan, there's something important I need to discuss with you. As you know, Sarah and I have been involved in various charitable activities for decades. We've built this organization from the ground up, and it's been our life's work. But as we grow older, we need to ensure that our legacy continues. Ethan nodded, sensing where the conversation was heading. I understand. It's important to have a plan for the future. Tom took a deep breath. Exactly. We've been considering who could take over and continue our mission. After much deliberation, Sarah and I believe you have the qualities and passion necessary to lead this organization. Ethan's eyes widened. You want me to? Tom cut him off with a reassuring smile. Yes, Ethan, we want you to take on a larger role. We'd like you to help manage the organization, oversee our projects, and ensure our vision remains intact. It's a big responsibility, but we believe you're up to the task. Ethan was taken aback. The offer was both thrilling and daunting. He had come to value the work he was doing and respected the Wilsons deeply, but the weight of such a responsibility was overwhelming. I'm honored by your trust, Ethan said slowly. But this is a lot to take in. I'm still in high school and dealing with my own personal issues. Tom nodded, his gaze compassionate. We understand. It's a big step, and we're not asking you to make a decision right away. Take some time to think about it. We'll support you in any way you need. Sarah and I just want to ensure that our work continues with someone who truly believes in it. Ethan left the Wilsons' home that evening with a heavy heart and a mind full of questions. The opportunity to manage the organization was a dream come true, but it also came with significant challenges. His family's financial struggles were a constant concern, and the idea of balancing his own life with such a demanding role seemed nearly impossible. At home, Ethan tried to share his thoughts with his family. His parents, struggling with mounting bills and debts, saw the offer through a different lens. They were skeptical but hopeful, seeing it as a potential solution to their financial problems. You should consider taking it, Ethan, his mother said one evening, her voice tinged with both excitement and anxiety. This could be a chance for us to finally get back on our feet. His father, however, was more cautious. It's a huge responsibility, son. Are you sure you're ready for this? Ethan didn't have a clear answer. He was torn between his personal ambitions and his family's expectations. The prospect of financial stability for his family was tempting, but he also felt a deep sense of duty to honor Tom and Sarah's legacy. As he lay awake that night, Ethan pondered the choice before him. The decision was more than just about taking over an organization. It was about the kind of person he wanted to become. The values of compassion, integrity, and commitment that Tom and Sarah had instilled in him clashed with the immediate practicalities of his own life. With the weight of the decision pressing heavily on his shoulders, Ethan knew that whatever choice he made, it would shape not only his future, but also the lives of those the organization sought to help. He needed to find a balance between his own aspirations and the greater good, a balance that would define his legacy. The days following Tom Wilson's unexpected death were a blur of grief and administrative chaos for Ethan. The Wilsons estate, with its myriad of assets and responsibilities, became a whirlwind of legal proceedings, press statements, and funeral arrangements. Ethan found himself deeply involved in the process, not only to honor Tom's memory, but also because he was now the unexpected heir to much of Tom's estate. The reading of Tom's will took place in a solemn conference room, filled with a mix of lawyers, family members, and close friends of the Wilsons. Ethan sat at the front, his palms sweating, as the family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, began to read the will aloud. The room was quiet, punctuated only by the shuffling of papers and the occasional murmur from the attendees. To my beloved wife, Sarah, I leave all my personal possessions and a significant portion of our shared wealth, Mr. Harrison read, his voice steady. To the charity organization we have built together, I leave the bulk of my estate with the condition that it continue to serve the communities we have supported. Ethan's heart pounded as he listened, trying to grasp the gravity of Tom's words. The room was filled with mixed reactions, some nodding in approval, others looking puzzled or even disgruntled. Ethan's thoughts were a chaotic mix of emotions as he realized he was about to learn his fate. And to Ethan Carter, Mr. Harrison continued, I leave a substantial part of my personal fortune and a controlling interest in the charity organization. It is my hope that Ethan will use this gift to continue our mission of compassion and community service. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The room seemed to spin around him. He had known Tom and Sarah's wealth was considerable, but the reality of inheriting such assets was overwhelming. The significance of the responsibility hit him like a tidal wave. The meeting concluded with polite but strained farewells. Ethan found himself alone in the cold, marble hallway, clutching the copy of the will. His mind was racing, grappling with the enormity of what lay ahead. The Wilsons' fortune was now his to manage, along with the charity they had so meticulously built. When Ethan returned home, the reaction from his family was a mixture of astonishment and urgency. His parents were astounded by the sudden change in their financial situation and saw it as a beacon of hope amidst their struggles. Ethan, this could solve all our problems, his mother exclaimed, her eyes bright with possibilities. You have to think about how this inheritance could help us. We could pay off our debts, maybe even move to a better house. His father, while more reserved, nodded in agreement. This is a chance to get back on our feet. But you need to be smart about it. Think of how this could benefit us. Ethan was torn. The prospect of using his inheritance to alleviate his family's financial troubles was appealing, yet it felt like a betrayal of Tom's vision. The charity's work was not only a tribute to Tom's life, but also a beacon of hope for many. Ethan couldn't ignore the weight of the promise he had implicitly made to Tom. He decided to visit Sarah Wilson to discuss the inheritance and his concerns. Sarah, who was deeply mourning the loss of her husband, was nonetheless composed and welcoming. The house was quiet, its usual warmth subdued by grief. Sarah, I need your guidance, Ethan said, his voice trembling. Tom's will. It's a lot to take in. I'm not sure how to balance this responsibility with my own needs and my family's expectations. Sarah looked at Ethan with a mixture of sadness and understanding. Tom had great faith in you, Ethan. He believed you would continue our work with integrity. It's a tremendous burden, but remember, you don't have to do this alone. We have a board of advisors and a team of dedicated staff who can help you. Ethan nodded, feeling a slight relief but still overwhelmed. What if my family pressures me to sell the assets or redirect the funds? I don't want to let Tom down, but I also need to think about my family's future. Sarah reached out and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. You have to follow your heart, Ethan. The organization is not just about the money. It's about the mission and the people we help. If you decide to stay true to Tom's vision, you'll be honoring his legacy in the most meaningful way. Ethan left Sarah's home with a clearer sense of his priorities. The decision was still daunting, but he knew that he had to choose a path that would uphold Tom's values and the commitment to the community they had all worked so hard to support. Back at home, Ethan's family continued to press him about the potential financial benefits. The tension was palpable, and Ethan struggled to balance their immediate needs with the broader responsibilities of his inheritance. As he lay awake at night, Ethan grappled with his choices. He knew that the path he chose would not only affect his family, but also determine the future of the charity and its mission. The weight of Tom's legacy rested heavily on his shoulders, and he was determined to find a way to honor it while navigating the complex terrain of his own life. With the decision made to honor Tom's legacy, Ethan plunged into his new role with a mix of determination and trepidation. The transition wasn't easy. The charity organization, despite its well-established presence and positive impact, faced numerous challenges. There were operational issues, strained relationships with some donors, and a pressing need for renewed vision and direction. Ethan spent long hours at the office, often late into the evening, poring over financial reports, meeting with staff members, and attending community events. He worked closely with the board of advisors and the management team, learning the intricacies of running the organization. His dedication did not go unnoticed. Despite his youth and inexperience, Ethan brought a fresh perspective and renewed energy that began to invigorate the organization. One of the first major changes Ethan implemented was a restructuring of the charity's programs to better address emerging community needs. He introduced new initiatives focused on job creation and education, expanding the charity's reach to more underprivileged areas. He also worked on strengthening partnerships with local businesses and schools, aiming to create a network of support that could sustain the charity's efforts long-term. Amidst this whirlwind of activity, Ethan found solace in his late-night visits to the Wilsons' home. Sarah, though grieving, remained a constant source of wisdom and encouragement. They often sat together, reminiscing about Tom's ideals and discussing how to navigate the challenges Ethan faced. One evening, as they sipped tea in the sunlit kitchen, Sarah said, "Ethan, I'm so proud of how you've embraced this role. Tom would have been thrilled to see the changes you're making." Ethan smiled, though his eyes betrayed his fatigue. "Thank you, Sarah. It's been challenging, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction. The staff and the community are starting to see the impact of the new initiatives." Sarah's gaze softened. Tom always believed that true success was not in the money we had, but in the lives we touched. Remember that, especially when things get tough. Ethan took her words to heart, using them as a guiding principle in his work. He saw firsthand the difference the organization made, new community centers being built, scholarships being awarded, and people finding hope where there once was despair. Despite his professional success, Ethan's personal life was still in flux. The strain with his family continued, as they struggled to accept that the wealth he had inherited was being used to further the charity's mission, rather than directly solving their financial problems. Tensions were high at home, and Ethan often found himself caught between his commitment to the organization and his family's needs. Alice, who had moved on with her life, unexpectedly reappeared in Ethan's world. She reached out to him after hearing about the positive changes he was making with the charity. Her return was a mixture of nostalgia and unresolved feelings. They met at a small cafe, the same one where they had shared many memories before the breakup. Alice, looking more mature and thoughtful, approached Ethan with a tentative smile. "Ethan, it's good to see you," she said, her voice carrying a note of sincerity. "I've been following what you've been doing with the charity. I'm really impressed." Ethan felt a pang of old emotions but maintained his composure. "Thanks, Alice. It's been a challenging journey, but it feels worthwhile." Alice looked at him with a mix of admiration and regret. "I've had time to think about everything. I realize now that I didn't fully understand your choices back then. I was upset, but I see how much you've grown and how dedicated you are to this work." Ethan nodded, appreciating her acknowledgement. "It's been a tough path, but I'm committed to making a difference. I hope you're doing well too." Alice's eyes softened. "I am. I've learned a lot from our time apart. I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you, and maybe we could start fresh as friends." Ethan considered her words. Their past was complex, and while he appreciated her gesture, he knew that his life had taken a different path. "I'd like that," he said slowly. "But right now, my focus is on this work and the people it affects. I hope you understand." Alice nodded, respecting his decision. "Of course. I'm just glad to see you doing what you're passionate about." The conversation with Alice brought Ethan a sense of closure and clarity. He realized that while his past had shaped him, it was his present and future that mattered most. He continued to lead the charity with renewed vigor, guided by the values Tom had instilled in him and the lessons he had learned along the way. Under Ethan's leadership, the charity flourished. It became a beacon of hope with expanded programs and greater community impact. Ethan's efforts not only honored Tom Wilson's legacy, but also created a new legacy of his own, one defined by compassion, resilience, and a commitment to making a positive difference in the world. As the years went by, Ethan looked back on his journey with a deep sense of fulfillment. He had faced personal and professional challenges, but he had remained true to the principles that mattered most. His story was one of transformation, illustrating how a single act of kindness could evolve into a lifelong mission of giving. In the end, Ethan's legacy was not just in the wealth he inherited or the organization he managed, but in the countless lives he touched and the positive change he brought to the world.